too long, Africa's history has been misunderstood and misrepresented. Many believe that Africa is a continent without advanced civilizations or global connections until the West came along. But these ideas are far from the truth. Actually, Africa has a rich history full of powerful empires and incredible cultural achievements. Many assumptions and biases just make it hard for us to see the true beauty of the continent. So today, let's reach out for the truth. What mind-blowing facts can we find by questioning the world's biases? Let's find out. In this video, we'll debunk the most persistent myths about Africa and its history, myths that have changed how many people view the continent. So please give this video a like to show your support, subscribe for more insightful discussions, and let's get right into it. Myth number 1. Africa is a dark continent isolated from the rest of the world. This myth is harmful because it makes it sound like Africa was some distant, forgotten place with no connection to the world. It pushes the wrong idea that Africa needed to be saved by outsiders. But that's not the truth at all. Africa was never cut off. In fact, way before European colonizers showed up, Africans were already part of big global trade networks. The Swahili coast in East Africa was a busy place where Africans, Arabs, Persians, and Indians did business and shared cultures. Cities like Kilwa and Mombasa were full of trade, exchanging gold, ivory, and spices for goods like Chinese porcelain and silk from faraway places. The Kingdom of Aksum in today's Ethiopia was another powerful empire that traded with the Roman Empire and India. Aksum had its own coins and made deals with other big civilizations, proving Africa was fully involved in global affairs. And in Great Zimbabwe, archaeologists found Syrian glass and Chinese ceramics, which shows Africa was connected to global trade routes across continents. Saying Africa is isolated just isn't true. It ignores how deeply Africa was linked to the rest of the world through trade, culture, and diplomacy long before European powers showed up. Recognizing this truth helps us see the real richness of Africa's history and how connected it's always been. Myth number 2. Everyone in Africa is poor and has always been poor. One deeply established myth is that all Africans live in poverty and have always lived in poverty, with no growing industries or opportunities. But historically, many African societies thrived economically and culturally long before the poverty stereotype even took hold. Kingdoms like Mali and Ghana were once powerful empires with prosperous trade networks. The Kingdom of Ghana, which thrived from about 300 CE to 1200 CE, became wealthy by controlling trade routes across the Sahara, where merchants exchanged gold, ivory, and salt. After Ghana, the Kingdom of Mali emerged around 1235 CE. Mali then continued to control vital trade routes and prosper from gold and salt, while the ancient city of Timbuktu became a key center for trade and education, known for its universities and libraries that attracted scholars from far and wide. Needless to say, many parts of Africa were thriving throughout history. Not all African nations today are poor either. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has a GDP of more than $594 billion and is projected to become one of the world's largest economies. Meanwhile, South Africa is home to the continent's most developed financial sector, and its stock exchange ranks 18th globally. Africa is also home to booming industries and vast natural resources. Take oil and gas, for example. Africa holds enormous potential in this sector, with the majority of global oil and gas discoveries in 2013 happening in Africa. Countries like Nigeria, Libya, Algeria, and Egypt export massive amounts of oil and gas to the global market. Africa's mineral resources are no joke either. South Africa alone produces 75% of the world's platinum, while countries like Guinea, Zambia, and Ghana are key exporters of minerals like bauxite, cobalt, and gold. These resources are very important, not only to Africa's economy, but also to the global market. So, while some parts of Africa face challenges, the continent itself is far from the poverty-stricken narrative that is rather believed. There are industries, resources, and opportunities that continue to grow, and it's important to understand this broader picture. Myth number 3. Black Africans were biblically destined to be slaves. The myth that Black Africans were biblically destined to be slaves came from a deliberate misinterpretation of the Bible, specifically the narrative of the curse of Ham. This narrative was distorted by slave traders, colonizers, and pro-slavery theologians, claiming that Ham, one of Noah's sons, was cursed and his descendants were meant to be servants. They falsely associated this curse with Africans, claiming that they were meant to be the enslaved descendants of Ham, and using it to rationalize the brutal mistreatment of millions of people. In the 15th and 16th centuries, as European nations sought to expand their empires through the colonization of Africa and the Americas, this myth gained popularity. Europeans, driven by greed and a hunger for power, began to institutionalize racial hierarchies, claiming that Africans were inherently inferior, both morally and intellectually. They described Africa as a land lacking in civilization, religion, and political systems, and painted Africans as primitive and underdeveloped. This racist ideology provided a moral justification for the Atlantic slave trade that allowed European colonizers to strip Africans of their humanity. By claiming that their actions were supported by the Bible, they were able to feel righteous while carrying out horrific acts. Myth number 4. There was no concept of organized religion in Africa before Christianity and Islam. The idea that Africa lacked organized religion prior to the arrival of Christianity and Islam is a big misunderstanding of the continent's spirituality. Many African societies had established complex religious beliefs and systems long before these major world religions emerged. Traditional African religions often involved worshiping a supreme creator deity, as well as spirits associated with natural elements. They included rich spiritual practices, ancestor veneration, and rituals that guided societal norms and values. The Vodun religion in West Africa, for example, had sophisticated cosmologies and systems of deities. The belief systems of the Yoruba, with their pantheon of Orishas, and the spiritual practices of the Sand people in southern Africa, are just a few examples of this deep spiritual heritage. Africa's religious history is actually so powerful that it became a huge influence in the development and spread of major world religions. Ancient Egypt influenced early religious thought in the Mediterranean and beyond, contributing to philosophical and religious traditions that shaped Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Ethiopia is home to one of the world's oldest Christian communities, with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church tracing its roots back to the 4th century CE. Myth number 5. Africa has made no contributions to global history. This myth comes from the dehumanization of African slaves and colonial stories. But is it true? Absolutely not. Africa's history is full of powerful kingdoms, empires, and cultures that shaped the world in many ways. Far from being isolated or primitive, Africa was a lively center of trade, culture, science, and governance long before Europeans arrived. Take ancient Egypt. It's over 5,000 years old and was a cradle of civilization. The incredible pyramids of Giza and advancements in math, astronomy, and medicine influenced ancient Greece a lot. The Mediterranean Sea was also historically a major hub of trade and cultural exchange, connecting Africa, Europe, and Asia. Ancient Egypt, located in North Africa, used the Mediterranean for trade and communication with other regions, including ancient Greece and the wider Mediterranean world. This sea facilitated the flow of ideas, goods, and innovations between these civilizations, making Africa an important influence on Mediterranean cultures. Egypt is just one part of Africa's history. In West Africa, the Kingdom of Mali became famous as a center of wealth and learning. Timbuktu's universities attracted scholars from all over the Islamic world, making it a hub of knowledge. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Kush built even more pyramids than Egypt and took control during the 25th dynasty. Africa also had its own way of governing. The Igbo people of Nigeria practiced a form of democracy through local gatherings long before the West developed its version. The Ashanti Empire had a system of checks and balances, and many African political systems focused on agreement and shared power. All of that being said, the myth that Africa has contributed nothing to world history is wrong, as Africa did indeed play a big part in human progress. Myth number 6. Africa is a dangerous place. A common misconception is that Africa as a whole is unsafe for travelers. While it's true that some areas may not be the best for tourism, this doesn't reflect the entire continent. The global media often focuses on the negative stories that highlight war, disease, and poverty. What often gets overlooked are the beautiful destinations in many African countries. In reality, there are plenty of safe and popular tourist spots in Africa that attract visitors from all over the world. Countries like Morocco, South Africa, Senegal, Ghana, and Tanzania offer everything from stunning beaches and breathtaking landscapes to rich cultures and welcoming locals. For example, Tanzania is home to Mount Kilimanjaro, Africa's highest peak, and the Serengeti National Park, famous for its wildlife and the Great Migration. Ghana is known for its historical forts, vibrant markets, and the beautiful Cape Coast, making it a must-see destination. In South Africa, cities like Cape Town and Johannesburg are filled with amazing sights, like the iconic Table Mountain and rich cultural experiences. Morocco boasts the stunning Sahara Desert, colorful souks, and historic cities like Marrakesh and Fez, which offer a blend of ancient traditions and modern hospitality. Recently, tourism in Africa is even growing rapidly, with the continent welcoming millions of international visitors each year. The United Nations World Tourism Organization reported that Africa saw a 10% increase in international tourist arrivals in 2019. This growth reflects travelers' interest in experiencing Africa's diverse cultures, stunning landscapes, and rich history. So while it's okay to be cautious when traveling anywhere, don't let the myth of danger keep you from exploring the wonders that Africa has to offer. Myth number 7. It is always hot in Africa. This is an interesting myth because of how popular it is. The idea that it's always hot in Africa just ignores the continent's amazing diversity. Because Africa is so big, each country has its own climate, seasons, and weather. For example, Ghana enjoys warm, tropical weather year-round, with temperatures often reaching 30 degrees Celsius or higher. It also has 2 rainy seasons in the south, usually in April and November, which help create lush, green landscapes. In Kenya, the heat is drier, and temperatures are usually between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius. The country also gets short bursts of rain in April and November, bringing relief and helping the wildlife thrive in places like the Masai Mara. On the coast, Zanzibar has more humid weather and slightly higher temperatures. This beautiful island is known for its stunning beaches and rich culture, showing a different side of Africa's climate. Surprisingly, Africa has places where you can find snow. The mountains in South Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, and Mount Kenya can get snow almost every year. These snowy peaks stand out against the warm, tropical areas around them. Overall, Africa has a wide range of temperatures and weather patterns that go beyond the idea of constant heat. Its snowy mountains and tropical beaches just go to show the incredible climate diversity found across this vast continent. Myth number 8. Africans only lived in huts. It's hard to believe, but even today, there are people who think that pre-colonial Africa was nothing more than a land of simple huts, with no signs of advanced architecture or civilization. This harmful stereotype reduces the complexity and diversity of African societies to a single, misguided image. Not only is this untrue, but it's also an insult to the rich history of architectural innovation and societal complexity that flourished across the continent. Yes, some Africans lived in huts, just as people around the world lived in similar types of homes depending on their environment and needs. But to suggest that this is all Africa had is to ignore a wealth of architectural ingenuity. Consider the Kingdom of Aksum in what is now Ethiopia, which thrived from around 100 AD to 940 AD. Aksum was famous for its towering obelisks, intricately carved from single pieces of stone, some of which stood over 24 meters tall. These obelisks, used as markers for royal tombs, are among the most impressive feats of engineering from any ancient civilization, rivaling structures in Europe and Asia in both skill and grandeur. In West Africa, we find another astonishing example in the Great Mosque of Djenné, located in present-day Mali. The original mosque, first built in the 13th century, was made from sun-baked mud bricks and plaster, demonstrating sophisticated construction techniques adapted to the local climate. The current structure, restored in 1907, remains the largest mud brick building in the world, showcasing an architectural tradition that spans centuries. Then there's Great Zimbabwe, a medieval city-state whose stone structures were built between the 11th and 15th centuries. The massive stone walls, some rising to 11 meters, were constructed without the use of mortar, relying solely on the precise placement of interlocking stones. This architectural marvel has mystified scholars for years, with its intricate design pointing to advanced knowledge of both engineering and urban planning. Great Zimbabwe was the heart of a powerful trading empire connecting southern Africa to the wider Indian Ocean trade network. These examples aren't just isolated occurrences or exceptions to the rule, because they represent a long and proud tradition of architectural and societal development across Africa. So the next time someone says Africa only has huts, remind them of the magnificent cities, monumental structures, and innovative engineering that testify to Africa's advanced civilizations, long before colonization ever touched the continent. Myth number 9, Africa had no writing. This myth is really painful because so many people believe it. The idea that writing in Africa started with colonization is not only wrong, but also silences centuries of African voices and histories. The truth is, Africa had its own writing systems that were created before or independently from European influence. One of the best examples is the Vai script from Liberia. Created in the early 19th century by Momolu Dualu Bukele, this script was designed specifically for the Vai language. At one time, the literacy rate among the Vai people was even higher than in parts of Europe and the United States. The Vai script is still used today, showing Africa's rich intellectual history. Another important writing system is the Ge'ez script from Ethiopia. This ancient language has been written for over 1,600 years and is still used in religious texts, and to write languages like Amharic and Tigrinya. Ethiopia's tradition of written records and literature is among the oldest in the world, which proves that Africa had ways of writing long before European colonization. In North Africa, the Tifinagh script is another example of Africa's writing tradition. Used by the Berber-speaking Tuareg people, it has roots going back to at least the 3rd century BCE. In West Africa, the Nko script was developed in the 1940s by Solomon Kante to write Manding languages, and it has become a vital tool for literacy and cultural preservation. Additionally, the Osmania script was created in the early 20th century for the Somali language. These are just a few of the many African scripts that show a long and rich tradition of writing. The existence of these systems reflects centuries of creativity, knowledge, and a strong desire to preserve African stories and cultures. Myth number 10, all of Africa is full of disease. The idea that all of Africa is struggling with diseases like Ebola or HIV/AIDS is very common, but it's not fully accurate. While many African countries do face health challenges, it's important to realize that not all nations are affected equally. For example, the Ebola outbreak that caught global attention mainly hit 3 countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, during its peak in 2015. The panic and misinformation that spread worldwide created the false impression that the entire continent was overrun by the virus. What many people don't understand is that Ebola isn't easily spread. It requires direct contact with the bodily fluids of an infected person, so casual travel to Africa isn't a serious risk for most people. Despite what the media sometimes shows, the virus never had the potential to become a global pandemic like many feared. This myth also contributes to a bigger misunderstanding of Africa's health situation. While some areas do struggle, many others are healthier and more stable than the global narrative suggests. Africa is not a land of disease. It has thriving communities and successful health initiatives that deserve recognition. Myth number 11, African food is not good. This idea is misleading because there isn't just one African food. Each country in Africa has its own distinct cuisine with unique flavors and ingredients. Trying local food is a great way to experience the culture of a place. In Africa, many dishes are made from fresh local ingredients, giving visitors a true taste of each region's cuisine. In Ghana, meals often have a spicy tomato base. Popular dishes include okra or palm nut soups and a bean stew called red red. Cassava, plantain, and yam are common side dishes. Fresh fish and tropical fruits like pineapples and coconuts are also widely enjoyed along the Keda Lagoon. In Kenya, a staple food is ugali, a maize porridge usually served with vegetable or bean stews. Rice is also common, and sometimes meat or fish is added. Fresh fruits like bananas and oranges are part of everyday meals. On the island of Zanzibar, seafood is a major part of the cuisine. Thanks to its history as a trading hub, Zanzibari food blends spices and flavors from east and west. Commonly eaten foods include vegetables, rice, ugali, and a variety of fresh fruits. In short, African food is incredibly diverse and full of rich, delicious flavors that reflect each country's unique heritage. Myth number 12, Africa is a country. False. Africa is not a country, but a continent made up of more than 50 countries. Each has its own government, culture, and languages. In fact, Africa is home to thousands of different languages, which can be grouped into 5 major language families. While there are some cultural similarities across the continent, Africa is incredibly diverse, much like any other large region in the world. Each country has its own unique identity and history, contributing to the rich variety of cultures across Africa. Myth number 13. Africans are primitive and lack innovation. The idea that Africa is primitive is a long-standing misconception. This term isn't scientifically valid. It's more of a derogatory label used by Europeans and Americans to describe cultures that are different from their own. People often toss around primitive to refer to those who don't adopt Western behaviors and technology, but that view is outdated and honestly insulting. African societies have their own diverse lifestyles, arts, and technologies, each influenced by their culture and environment. Far from lacking innovation, Africa has made many advancements in technology, governance, social structures, and art. Today, several African cities are using technologies that rival or even surpass those in some Western countries. For example, many African nations are adopting telecommunication systems that even offer better connectivity than some parts of the United States. The idea that Africans are primitive doesn't reflect the reality of their skills or achievements. It's simply an insult that distorts the truth. As we've seen, the myths surrounding Africa have created a distorted picture of the continent and its people. These misconceptions have undermined Africa's rich history, innovation, and diversity for far too long. It's really important to understand that Africa is not a monolithic land of poverty, disease, or stagnation, but a dynamic continent with vibrant cultures, advanced technologies, and limitless potential. If we can address these misconceptions, we can begin to see Africa for what it truly is, a continent that continues to make valuable contributions to the world. So, the next time you hear these myths, remember the truth and help spread a more accurate and respectful understanding of Africa. Let's celebrate the resilience, beauty, and brilliance of this incredible continent and its people. Thank you for joining us in this eye-opening discussion on debunking myths about African history. If you found value in this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for similar discussions. Also, share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep seeking the truth and expanding your understanding of the world.